We're both fans of entrepreneurship, right?
100%.
Like unfair wealth advantage, right? I mean, it really, entrepreneurship is amazing for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I think it's going to solve the world's biggest problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is without a doubt. But from a wealth perspective, it is unfair, honestly. It's the best way to gain wealth. So let's talk more about that.
Yeah, the reason I like calling it an unfair wealth creator is for a couple of principles, and I like acronyms, and so
No, I didn't know that. Like 5 today, probably.
Yeah. So I call this one WELD, right? And WELD, what does WELD do? It holds things together. So what holds this wealth creation of entrepreneurship together? So what does WELD stand for? First, W is write-offs.
Yep.
E is exit value. L is lower taxes, and D is depreciation. So I believe when you combine those things, it is worth the risk of becoming an entrepreneur. So let's just talk about each one. W stands for write-offs. Tyler, you've been an entrepreneur many times. Do you have any experiences in the write-off category?
It's my favorite. Yeah, there's so many ways we can go about this, but think of it as, God, there's so many directions you can go. It gets me excited, honestly. So, if you have a W-2, maybe you have a high W-2 earner, a business can allow you to write off some of that W-2 income. It allows you to get some of that money back. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to have control over your money, which is really, really important, right? So for instance, foreign travel, if you travel foreign, all your transportation, so there and back, that counts as a travel day, right? If you're foreign travel, only 25% of your time over there can be business. And then that gets written off. The whole trip can be written off. So get creative with it. Like if you're thinking about a mastermind group, do one that's overseas, leverage those sort of things because it really is an advantage to you. Plus your personal expenses, your cars, accelerated depreciation on your vehicles, office expense at home, landscaping potentially could be part of it because it's your house and you have meetings at your house. All those things stack up for write-offs.
100%. Yep, absolutely. Healthcare, retirement, all those things can be write-offs. E, exit value.
Yep. Another big one. I mean, you talk about ultimate wealth creator. A lot of people talk about cash flow, the money they're getting out of that business all the time, every single year. But the real value is when you go sell that business. You've done it a few times, my friend. So talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very important part of entrepreneurship for me because, I think about it. You always have to compare the idea of entrepreneurship versus where you can make money somewhere else. Let's say in a job. So let's just use numbers. Let's say if I can make $100,000 in a job and $70,000 in my own business. Yep. Which one am I taking? All day, every day, 7 days a week, I'm taking that 70 grand in my own business. Now, why? Well, because of WELD for one, but two, when I leave that, well, first of all, what do I trade for that 100,000 at my job? I trade 40 hours a week. I trade time with my family or whatever else. So that's number one, where on entrepreneurship, I might be able to create flexibility in my schedule with certain strategies. But more importantly, when I leave my $100,000 a year job, what happens to that money? Goes away. It's gone. Right?
Yeah.
When I decide I'm done with my business, I can now go sell that because it's a cash flowing business that has value to the next person that wants to own it. So let's say I can sell it for 3 or 4 multiple. That is an unfair wealth creator, right?
100%.
Once you create a successful business, you get to go sell that asset.
Yep.
Such an unfair advantage when creating wealth. All right, L,
Let's go back to that real quick because that's really good. Like this is the ultimate, guys. Like think about this. So let's say you're buying a franchise. Let's just say you invest $300,000. You have this thing for 5 years. You're going to cash flow it. Depending on the franchise, you're probably going to make, a couple $100,000 or $100,000 a year, pay your salary, write off expenses, and then go and sell that for a multiple of sometimes as high as 10% sometimes. It is unbelievable. So I just don't want to glaze over it because it's incredible.
Yeah, 10x. You said 10%. I think you meant 10x.
10x,
right?
sorry,
10x. And the thing in a franchise system too is you've got a network of built-in buyers.
Yes.
When you buy into a growing franchise brand and other franchisees are around you, you don't have to necessarily go to the local business broker and say, hey, take 10% of my sale. What you can do is go tap your franchise network and say, are you interested in buying my business?
Territory next one over. Call them up. Hey, I got a successful business. Want to sell it? Yep. No problem. I've done it before, actually.
Yep.
All right. So the next one's L, lower tax rate. I could talk on it, but I'm going to defer to you because I think you're probably more suited to talk about this.
I don't have a ton of examples of how I've used it. It's just always part of being an entrepreneur, right? The ability to leverage lower tax rates. So as of today, I think if you're earning W-2 income, you're paying somewhere between like 10 and 37%, I think is the number, right? Of
too much.
Too much.
It's a lot. Doesn't matter too much.
There's a lot that goes out. Now, if I sell a business asset, I'm paying, I believe it's somewhere between 15 and 20% plus usually a state number. And as long as you live in a state that's reasonable, your tax rate is going to be lower. So I don't have any specific stories on how I leveraged it. The story is all of entrepreneurship. Every time I sell a business asset, every time that I have a capital gain or things like that, I get a better tax rate than the person that makes the same money out of a job.
And these things stack up. Like these are all these acronyms of WELD. They all stack up. So when you see the entrepreneurs get so far ahead, that's why, because they all stack up over time.
Yeah, it holds entrepreneurship together. You weld it together. D, depreciation.
Yeah, so especially with like heavier machinery, vehicles around franchising, think tree service or larger equipment, you can depreciate those assets, right? So that's important. Also your vehicles, personal vehicles, if you're using them for business, you can depreciate those as well. There's a lot of depreciation with a lot of different assets.
Right. And the great thing about depreciation now too, a lot of times you think about depreciation and you put it on a depreciation schedule. Whatever you buy, you depreciate out over a number of years. But some of the things you just talked about, what about Section 179, right? Let's depreciate it right away. Bonus depreciation, depreciate it right away. So for those folks that have earned have capital gains from other businesses, or they need a reason to write down those types of things, you can invest into a franchise. I would encourage you start looking around summertime, because by the time you do your due diligence, you buy a franchise and you get your equipment, you have to put that equipment in service before the end of the year. But as soon as you do, you accelerate that depreciation.
So talking that, just so everyone clarifies and people understand that, what does that mean? Accelerated depreciation 179 schedule. What does that look like? What does that mean?
In simple terms, let's say I spend $50,000 on a piece of equipment, right? And it has to qualify, of course, and we can help you identify what those things are. But I buy a $50,000 piece of equipment and I have a $100,000 gain. If I can put that piece of equipment in service for my business before the end of the year, I accelerate it all. I take $50,000 off of my $100,000 gain. And now instead of getting taxed on that $100,000, I get taxed on $50,000 gain. So my tax bill is lower. And now I've got an asset creating more revenue and wealth for me over here.
Yeah, that's why there's CPAs, by the way. But don't take the people on TikTok's viewpoints on this stuff. They oversimplify it, right? So there are limitations here, like your personal vehicles and things. Make sure they are used for business services. So just don't buy a G-Wagon and then go right off the whole thing, but make sure you have a good CPA that can help you, obviously.
Yeah, of course. The last thing I'll say on this, why I believe entrepreneurship is the unfair wealth creator, besides WELD, is there's a saying that we've all heard, which is the greater the risk, the greater the reward. So if WELD was easy, everybody would be an entrepreneur, which I think most people should be considering some type of entrepreneurship. But it's the risk that prevents that from happening, right? And it's why we are so passionate about our mission of helping people reduce the risk. Because first, we know entrepreneurship is the unfair wealth creator. Then we know franchising in many cases can be a safer way of owning a business, right? You got to work with us to identify which franchise brands. And then we layer on things on top of that to make sure we are reducing the risk when buying a franchise, the right process, the right information, the right brands. So entrepreneurship can greatly have its risk reduced when you work with us, which ultimately then creates an unfair wealth advantage for our clients as well.
I love it. I love it.